It's time for Talking Pictures Trivia. A quick friendly reminder, a CRT TV works by shooting electrons that are caught by phosphorus to make color.
Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of geographically challenged friends explore movies through trivia as an excuse to keep their friendships alive. I'm one of these friends and today's host, Nick, and with me is
Tom
and KJ.
Great to have you back as always. Additionally, joining us as a guest for this episode is
Nathan Hanks.
Thanks for joining us, Nate. Nate and KJ taught together in Japan. In between classes, Nate and KJ used to debate and philosophize over trivial matters and never really came to any conclusion. Nate is a co-host on the Sci-Fi podcast, which explores and digests pieces of fiction from a philosophical point of view. Google Nathan Hanks or Sci-Fi for more information. Nate conveniently likes movies. For those joining us for the first time, we start off each episode with a movie quiz, as these pivotal questions will determine who earns today's trivia crown. Questions in the first round will be worth 1 point, and questions in the second round will be worth 2 points. Then we followed up with our famous movie rant where anything goes. KJ, tell us about today's movie.
Today we are going back to 2014 to start our Guilty Pleasures movie block. The first season of True Detective is released on HBO. Matthew McConaughey wins a Golden Globe. Jay Leno finishes his time on The Tonight Show. Russia hosts the Winter Olympics. Gangnam Style becomes the first video to reach 2 billion views on YouTube. And during all this, Christopher Nolan releases his 9th movie, Interstellar. Before Interstellar, Christopher Nolan released Memento, Insomnia, the Batman Begins trilogy, The Prestige, and Inception. Other movies you could have seen in theater with Interstellar include the first John Wick movie, Big Hero 6, The Hunger Games, Mockingjay Part 1, the third Hobbit movie, and American Sniper. In Interstellar, we spend the first act establishing that the world is failing, specifically that food is not growing as needed. We follow Cooper, played by Matthew McConaughey, as he is frustrated with being a farmer, as he is a qualified pilot and engineer. His daughter Murph is seeing strange things in her room, which include coordinates being spelt out by falling dust. The coordinates lead Cooper and Murph to Michael Caine, who then explains that NASA has been reformed and has been tasked to find a new home for humanity by exploring 3 potential planets on the other side of a wormhole. From here, we enter the second act, and we go on adventures to a planet where the adversary is the environment in the form of tidal waves. Then we go to a planet where the adversary is man in an attempt to find a suitable home. None of these new worlds seem to suit, and we spend the third act tying everything back to the beginning in a way that doesn't make that much sense at all. Nick, if you only had one word to describe Interstellar, what would it be?
Anomaly. Tom?
Exploration. Nate?
Spiritual.
And my word would be adventure. It's time for question 1. How is Coop going to punish Murph for her insubordination in school?
Locked in.
Locked in.
Locked in.
All right, Nick, what do you have?
They're going to the baseball game.
Nate?
I don't know, and I'm locked in on that.
Tom?
You see, yeah, they're going to see the New York Yankees play, but I think was the A's, but I'm not sure. The green team.
All right, points for Nick and Tom. Yes. So the movie starts off in a post-apocalyptic future, right? We're not in the apocalypse. That happened when Coop was growing up, I guess, and yet he was an engineer and a pilot, so that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now he's a farmer, but we're after that. It's the world is slightly healing, a little bit better, but still failing. And I'd never really seen this kind of environment. I really enjoyed it.
It seems to be like a Malthusian environment, right? Where Malthus is the guy who said that population grows at a greater rate than you can cultivate land to make food, and therefore there's a natural check on humans. And Malthus is correct about this until people innovate and land becomes plentiful, or food becomes plentiful out of very little land. And it seems like whatever has happened, this anomaly that has caused the dirt to rise up, blah blah blah, has made the Malthusian trap true. So there seems to have been a revolution in which lots of people died, and then they hit a point of balance. right? A kind of natural equilibrium where everybody became a farmer. They just converted a ton of land into farmland. A bunch of people starved to death, and here we are in this somewhat settled dystopia. Um, there seems to be, though, in this dystopia, unlike others, a real sense of hope, right? And I think that's not necessarily due to the world building of the Nolans. I think it has to do with the fact that we're spending time with people who are very hopeful and very interested in exploration and won't let that go, namely Coop and Murph. We really don't see them ever in a state of desperation. It seems like when things are getting really bad, he's already off in space.
I just want to make sure we're using the word settled correctly here, because I think there may have been a drop off and now we're on kind of a flat line, but the planet is still eroding. So there's this thing called the blight that is taking one crop at a time. So it's a temporary relief, if you will, but it's not sustainable. And that's why they have this project to give, unfortunately, false hope to those who are on Earth. But we're kind of in that in-between part before it goes to really hitting the film. Before we get to Mad Max, where everything is just desert and everyone's looking for gasoline. We're right before that.
Yeah, I think that's it's good to lock in on this world, because the grandfather said something to his son about repopulating the planet. So it also seems like there is a massive extinction event for humanity, that it's not, simply things are changed as we know it. But there's not many people left. There's not armies any longer.
Yeah, there's barely a government, it seems, right? It seems like the government they have, all they can spare are these old robots that used to be Marines, right? So it seems like the resources are really tight. And it does seem at some point there was a great die-off. They mention that NASA was decommissioned because they refused to bomb starving people.
That's a good detail.
They said that at one point. Yeah. And so it seems like, it just seems like there was a great dying off. And I think what you're saying, Nick, is that this is happening from crop to crop, right? It's going from like wheat one year, and now the last thing left is corn, which thank God is, for them anyways, the most caloric, or you can transform it into the things that are most caloric. And that seems to be going away. But there does seem to be a point at which the government itself had also kind of run out of resources and run out of spirit, right? It seems like the world around Coop and Murph is despirited, right? They're enervated in a way that those characters aren't.
I like specifically the reference to education, where they're like, we don't need engineers, we need farmers. That's what's valued. So that the fact that the daughter was actually smart was almost like a disadvantage. And she's preaching these crazy ideas of how they went to the moon, where they're pretty much writing that off in the new textbooks as fiction. So it's interesting to see how they're changing the past to fit the current dialogue.
As an engineer, that statement didn't make very much sense to me, because farming technique can be just as important as the farming. So it was a typical no.
Also, isn't it a lot of engineering?
Matthew McConaughey made his own
Yeah,
machines like do what he wanted. So
but typical Nolan logic that doesn't really add up if you start thinking about it too much.
There's a bunch of that in this movie, but we probably will address some of that.
I just wanted to put a circle around something. What is it that doesn't make sense about this?
Engineers aren't valuable.
Right.
Oh, yeah, or they just weren't, being valued. Yeah, it's not like, they are in charge and know what's best, right? It's like the state of the world is so bad that, that's in a way, it's a little, you can see this is also maybe like a precursor to something like Snowpiercer, where if you just like position off the rest of people, they can kind of like keep believing cargo cult, whatever they'd like, in order to maybe go forward, just a little bit. They can just make up the history that they're going to tell, and it's almost nihilistic that they don't care about the truth of it.
Yeah, it's also they're trying to. It seems like there's a clash between this desire to strive and create and the desire to survive. And I think one of the things the movie is saying is that those are bound objectives. The desire to survive and the desire to create, to innovate are the same thing. And this world has, in the face of a great challenge, has taken those two factors and divorced them from one another. That's a redundant statement, but divorce them. And so that we see that's the major tension on Earth, is between, we just have to keep everybody safe, and we have to say the story that we need to keep everyone safe, which is a little different from Snowpiercer, because Snowpiercer is fairly malicious. This world seems to be lying almost out of desperation, right? There's no one in control.
Yeah, well, they both they're maintaining a status quo. That's right.
Yeah.
What it is it's just the lie of the cult, in order to maintain the power structure. That's all I mean. It's that they'll say whatever they need to do to get people to keep growing food. Even if the Titanic is going down, they'll never say that. They'll just take all the corn along and then have a secret base where, 10 people get to like live the rest of their lives, until everything goes away. Like, it's not a grand plan. It's just the lie of the system.
Yeah, I don't know. Did you get the impression, Nate, that there was like a system at work? Part of the dystopia for me was that there was the remnants of a system that was desperate to find order.
That's it. I mean, it's just it's just a stupid idiocracy at that point, where it's like things are just going to keep running down, and we're still going to dress up in blouses and suits, but really it's not adaptable, or it's not sufficient. It may be necessary to do these things, but it's kind of a head in the sand world that's coming on. As it just like goes back down to primeval man, basically. It's just like, you imagine that their goal is just to slope back down into whatever they can and like back away from all the structure of society.
It's just to keep people civilized. Listen, slowly we're eroding. The world is not going to support us anymore. But if we give you this false hope along the way, you'll keep doing what you need to do to survive. So it's not to go back to my favorite Mad Max, reference here. It's preventing that full breakdown.
And I think, again, for me, the difference between Mad Max, Snowpiercer, and this is that, and I think this is really key to the character of Cooper, is that it isn't a mendacious system based upon cruelty. Its mendaciousness is based upon the paralysis of despair. Right. The system itself has despaired of itself and of the people that it used to be responsible for. It still claims that responsibility, but it no longer has any energy. Right. And it can't produce it for people.
It feels more like The Postman than THX.
I wish I remembered The Postman.
The Postman is a slightly advanced future where they're basically recreating civilization with the bare bones of communication being a postman, or simple trades and farming. Is that right? It's not a water world.
No, not a water world.
Yeah.
That's where he has
might have been a
gills.
better, that might have been a better comparison. It's more water world than THX.
Yeah, and maybe we can talk more about this. I see the distinction that you're trying to make, and I think that the movie, as a authorial point of view, has an idea about things. It has who it considers its heroes and things like that, and its own vision about science in the future and the way things are going to go. Right, like it seems to have written out that the Earth can do it, versus something like Snowpiercer, which is that's at like the Earth actually can do it at the end. The lie is that it can't do it. So it depends on what's true or not in order to make these characters' moves heroic. For example, if the Earth can be saved and they keep going to, throw the Empire into the stars, then it seems awfully wasteful and destructive. And you imagine that even though there's a ship in the stars, there's still like a Mad Max on Earth for the dying days, they really have to get out there, Battlestar Galactica, and make a new go for humanity. But it depends on what the story seems to be saying in order for these things. So we might talk abstractly about the different ideas that people have in science fiction about, is a utopia possible? Is it only dystopia? Is everything ultimately going to burn out and then bounce back or whatever? But yeah, this movie has certain ideas. But it's interesting, like Cooper, who wants to be an explorer, And the other opposing view is that there should be caretaking. And he's like, well, we should be getting out there. And then like, we should be taking care of what we have. That's a real world view, fight. But in the movie has something to say about it. It sides with exploration, it seems, metaphysically.
It's time for question 2. During the second act of the movie, Cooper and his adventurers fly down to a planet with giant tidal waves. How are they able to use the engine that is flooded to escape?
Locked in.
There's a theme in this movie where they kind of show it, I don't know, over and over again. They kind of beat you over the head with it, where Cooper's like, well, we're going to improvise. Like when there's the flat tire, and they're like, what are we going to do? That was the flat. Like, well, we're improvised. We're going to figure it out. We're going to come up with the way to solve this. And then
It doesn't solve the flat tire problem though, but
No, but he gets a drone.
yeah.
Yeah. So this happens again in Act 2.
I'm trying to remember here. I thought it just dried.
Oh, that would have taken 45 minutes to an hour, which would have been like 7 years.
Good recall.
Yeah, if you guys remember the scene, it's almost dry, but it's not quite dry enough. And the wave's coming.
Why are you giving so many hints? I got this.
Is Tars with them down there? I forget if it's Tars or the other one is like, Cooper, you don't have any time.
All right. Locked in.
I'm going to lock in too, sure.
All right, Tom, what do you have?
Turn on the engine and add extra fuel.
Nate?
They combust the engine.
Nice. Nick?
They blast it with oxygen and then flip it on.
Here we go. Points for Nick. Yeah, so he uses the oxygen in the cabin to blow out the last of the water, to get it as dry as possible, and to spark the engine. So he uses that extra oxygen in there to get it going. So is oxygen fuel? That's a weird question.
No, that's
Tom.
good. No,
know.
that's
Yeah.
That's some good MacGyvering.
So I love the adventure part of this movie. I really think this is why this movie works. The first act, they're setting up why they need to go on the adventure, like in The Hobbit, right? Why they need to go. The dwarves want their treasure back, but they're in this safe, mundane world. They break that barrier into Fantasyland, and now they are exploring, in this case, is it the universe? It's not the galaxy, right? It's bigger than the galaxy.
Galaxies. No.
It's another galaxy.
Yeah.
It's a new galaxy.
It's another galaxy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just love the little adventures they went on, all the different planets.
See, I actually didn't take it as an adventure film. It really made me think more of the traditional sci-fi going back to like 2001: A Space Odyssey, with different segments, and even the way it went from one clip to another. And then they threw in these little adventures. So to me, it was more of an homage to the old school sci-fi with elements of adventure crammed in at the end. So I'm not saying that there weren't moments, but to me, it was more callback sci-fi and then little adventures inserted, especially in the quiet of space scenes, or how they didn't necessarily transition from one scene to another. We just understood time has passed and we're moving on to different things. So I'm not saying there was an adventure. I did enjoy them, specifically the water planet with the play of time and all of that. But I'd say it isn't adventure heavy. I think it's actually more sci-fi heavy.
Well, in terms of an adventure, I mean, they literally go on an adventure to, these different worlds, to a different galaxy and all that. In terms of the sort of the kind of Joseph Campbell leaving the home and becoming a new person through the quality of the adventure, I do think that's there. I think that's sort of there in most narratives, or most films are gonna have that kind of like kind of the individuals remade. I think the difference here between the comparison you were making, KJ, to The Hobbit is that Bilbo is called and he doesn't want to go, right? He's not equipped for this, and he has to become equipped for this. Cooper is called, and while his children do put the bumper on, right? He does hesitate because he does have these kids. He is really the man for this job. And he's also embodying already the spirit of exploration and adventure, right? He is the guy who would go on the Oregon Trail if it was that century, right? And I think that where Bilbo wouldn't be, right? Bilbo, you'd have to, you know, grab Gandalf and tell him to go to Oregon, or this metaphor is getting mixed. But you know, that I think is a major difference there. In terms of 2001, I think it's closer to that. And Nolan has said in interviews or indirectly to people on his team that that's what he was interested in. And 2001 is really, I'm not quite sure what that movie is supposed to be about. I mean, I've said this on this podcast before. I just don't like 2001 very much. But if we're going to put my value judgments aside, 2001 really is about the possibility of transcendence, right? In a very general way, that we can transcend this mortal coil and become something greater. Now, granted, that greater thing turns out to be a giant space baby, so I'm not entirely sure why transcendence is so valued in that movie. I think this movie is far more earthly, more grounded, and more grounded in the humanity that surrounds us all, which is why the theme ends up being this kind of idea of love, and how really love is that which transcends time and space. Love of the people around us and the people we like and associate with, not this otherworldly thing, right? It's almost as if the transcendence is local, right? He goes to another galaxy in order to find this local truth.
As far as an adventure goes, right? I mean, this has got some great like Nolan set pieces, like trying to match the rotation to join a docking station. Like if you understand the mechanics of that, it's like yeah, like good dance or good fight sequences. It's like that's actually a tough trick to do. That would be hard to do that.
I can imagine.
Right? Yeah. And then you're like, wait, okay. So, and then you're watching it, and then, you know, it plays out in that really tense way that Nolan's action does, like letting you feel it get closer, like creaking and, you know, building up, and you don't know if it's all going to blow apart or not. So yeah. And then of course, you know, the waves were great. You got to love little thruster moving you around action, you know.
And the music is phenomenal throughout all
Yes,
of
I'd
these
agree.
scenes. Oof.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd agree. The visuals are very good too,
Oof,
especially
it's a
in
stunning
space.
movie. The way the corn looks, the space, the dust.
Yeah,
I like how you started with corn.
The corn is the best I've ever seen corn. It's stunning. I really enjoy it.
Is it better than A Quiet Place corn?
I think visually it is, but not audioly. The corn sounds better in A Quiet Place.
Yeah, they should have hired the corn audio engineer from the other movie.
It's a rare job, but there's not a lot of people who do it.
Yeah. No, I've got a name for you. It's one man. It's his specialty.
I don't just do corn, I do all vegetables. After round one, Nick has 2 points. Tom's got a point. Nate, not yet, but I'm sure he'll get some in round two. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Hello, everyone. We have a very special guest today, Nick. Nick, tell us what you think the purpose of Talking Pictures Trivia really is.
It's just to keep people civilized. Listen, slowly we're eroding. The world is not going to support us anymore. But if we give you this false hope along the way, you'll keep doing what you need to do to survive.
Thank you, Nick. And remember, everyone, to rate and review Talking Pictures Trivia on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
And we're back. Nate, we're at the critical point of our episode where we ask the guests a key question. If you could watch this movie with anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
Erwin Schrödinger.
Go on.
I would want to walk him through, after, of course, we have some babblefish that makes him understand what's going on. What Christopher Nolan has to say about science fiction and physics, and the conscious experience, which is something that Erwin Schrödinger was onto in the early 1900s. He was working out what consciousness had to do with matter as well, and I think that he would be very interested to see it taken up, and would maybe be impressed by the fanfare of space seen from a fictional perspective that he couldn't have imagined.
What was his work on consciousness and matter?
Oh, I mean, the Schrodinger's cat, that old
Okay,
yarn,
yeah.
but there's also, he was also a spiritual person, and took science to be like Merv did at the beginning, actually, to be about what we don't know, what's going on. And so you have to take something and try and figure out what's going on with it. Even if it doesn't make sense or you can't explain it, you at least have to approach it. And yeah, so he was very interested in, like, maybe what was the cat thinking in the box? Perhaps that had a role. Perhaps consciousness had a role, because we know it is, but we don't really have a way of understanding its relationship to matter or reality.
So when was he alive? Would he have seen any movies?
No. He was a part of Einstein and Wolfgang Pauli and Niels Bohr at the conference in some European city of renown, and they were getting together. I mean, these guys would go on to make the atomic bomb and solve, at that time, Einstein was bringing in relativity and not yet special relativity, I don't think. And then Pauli was talking about spin, and they all were approaching the sciences at the height of that time. And the observer effect and understanding, the wave and particle dual nature of light, that was first being uncovered there. And it opened up ideas into, other worlds and other dimensions, and things moving relative to other things, and the idea of something faster than light. Everything was really there, and we've kind of just been saturating in it as a pop culture for 100 years.
It is interesting to bring up the cat, the consciousness of the cat, or something like that. That seems to really speak to this movie, especially because this idea of, what is this thing feeling within a system that is beyond our ability to imagine. I mean, we may be able to document it in certain ways and with certain mathematical tools, but it isn't comprehensible.
Yeah, and just to tie this back around, it seems like Christopher Nolan is saying that will and the experience of love as a conscious phenomenon is a part of the physical workings of the universe as we understand them logically. That emotion moves through time and is relevant in some way.
Yeah, you're willing things into existence, right? The world is will and an idea. That concept it's not quite the same thing, but this idea of the kind of like the individual asserting through passion a certain desire, that kind of striving ends up becoming part of the laws of the universe, or how we can control and contend with the laws of the universe.
It's time for question 3. What does Cooper use to find Murph to give the quantum data from TARS?
Locked in.
Yes, locked in.
Locked in. Although the wording may have confused me, but I think I got it.
All right, Nate, what do you have?
Watch.
Tom?
Yeah, I had the same thing, the watch.
Nick?
The second hand's on the watch.
So that is what Cooper uses to like relay to give the.
That's why I didn't know your
Okay.
question was confused.
You want me to ask it again? Should
I know. I think
again?
I've got the other answer. But
Okay, hang on. We'll clear slate. Clear slate for everybody. Clear slate. Hang on. I'm gonna ask it again. Okay. What does Cooper use to find Murph to give the quantum data to TARS?
To find Murph.
To find Murph.
To find Murph. Okay, I'm locked in again.
Okay, locked in.
I'm not sure on the technicality here, but I'll lock in.
All right, Nate, what do you have?
The Tesseract, or advanced ship from our ancient yet to be people in space.
Nick?
I was going to say Tesseract.
Tom?
I was also going to say the Tesseract. Is it that wrong?
Yeah.
Is it okay? Can we?
Okay, it's got to be the question at this point.
Can we
It
lock
could
in
be.
something else? I'm going to lock in something
I think I want
else.
to do
I'm
a
going to
third
lock in
one.
something else too. No,
Okay.
I'll lock in again.
Okay, all right. I'll ask the question again.
It's the same question.
Yeah. What does Cooper use to find Murph to give the quantum data from TARS. So he's like going through the fifth dimension or whatever, and he's like, Murph, I can't find you, Murph. What do I do? How do I find you, Murph?
Oh.
And then TARS is like, you got to
thought
do
the
this.
answer was 4-dimension.
And Cooper's like, no, I know what it is. That's how I'm gonna find her.
Oh, I got it locked in.
You guys are
I'm
gonna
gonna
pick
lock
yourself
something
up.
in.
Okay.
Yeah.
What? My third answer?
You locked in, Nick?
Yeah.
All right, Tom, what do you have?
He knocks over the lander, the model of the lander shuttle.
Nick?
Books in the library.
Nate?
Love.
Yes, he uses love to find Murph.
Brant
Tom, you
was
brought it
right.
up earlier
It's
in the
love.
episode.
Oh my
That's all you
gosh.
guys were talking about during the guess question.
Oh my gosh.
It was love. This third act, it was visually all right, but man, good thing the first two acts are incredible because this third act, what do you guys
Flop.
think of the third, right?
No, this is the thing that always like it was a strong movie until like the end. It's just like, okay.
I think it's great and wonderful. Well, I mean, as far as science fiction goes, I think Christopher Nolan is on record for saying that this is scientifically accurate. Now, there's so many things of interest that and see, oh, well, then then it would be nice to have maybe some substantive things to go off of rather than like a general impression. But if you take certain things to be the case, that there's another dimensionality, that there are future people time traveling. These are actual suggestions for how things work. Like they're a mechanic that is guess or a prediction at what's going on, or at least the what if of it is trying to play out. And there's a lot of interesting ideas behind other life in the stars. That was at the beginning of this. Who are they? That was the question. There's a way to get to another galaxy that's not natural. It shows intelligence having made it. That is an interesting question that is legit right now. And the nature of another higher power, I think is really interesting too. Especially if we talk about, how they are communicating, being able to put someone, move someone through time. I mean, the third act has a solid time machine mechanic to it. It allows him to interact with himself. He can't make things different. And this is where Tenet comes in. What he explored in Interstellar is an extension of his time travel thinking in Tenet as well, that there are parallel things that can interact with one another, but you're not necessarily making a new one. Whatever happened, but you can influence the past, and willpower is a part of that as well. Spoiler for Tenet. So it's just, as far as science fiction goes, which at its best is looking for the way things might be theoretically, this is a pretty interesting shot at what's going on.
Yeah, I will give you, how else is he going to end it? And it was, as again, it was visually nice, and I think it shows some of Christopher Nolan's shortfallings with his logic, but I do also like any time travel movie where the ink is dry. So I also will say that I did like that aspect of this.
Yeah, well, what's illogical about it? I maybe like, what's the argument?
I guess one of the things he says, one of the things that Cooper says is, or maybe Tar says it, is the fifth dimensional beings made a spot where your three-dimensional body could travel around and move. And maybe, but and he had to put something on the screen so we could see it, and we needed something identifiable that was Cooper. But I don't think that would resolve that way. And I mean, who am I? I don't know. But I think it was silly to kind of go in this direction for this movie to begin with.
Can I interject here? Because one thing I'm a little confused about in this conversation is they're us, right? The fifth dimensional beings are humans. Isn't that what we learn in the end?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the movie
right?
suggests it may not be literally Cooper, but it might be a descendant of Cooper that was able to set this up.
Yeah, but it's not a higher being. ultimately.
What I mean is a higher power, like in a apex kind of situation. Technologically, they can do things that we can't. They have more power. They're intelligent. They're a higher power. It doesn't have to be a deification.
Or a better, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Yeah. But I think the fact that it's revealed they are us, right? That they're not, what happens in the end, and we'll put some of the logic aside. I mean, I actually really didn't have, I really liked the visuals of the last. I actually have a lot of trouble with the first two acts, and the third act I'm a lot better with. So I kind of agree with you, Nate. I think that the last act works a lot better. But I think what's so surprising about, or what's surprising is the right word. What's nice and what fits about finding out that these aren't something else. This isn't other. This is us. This is something that we create, and that they've created it so that we can, or so that specifically Cooper can communicate through a token of his affection to his daughter to allow humans to survive. Um, I think that ends up being somewhat the point of the movie is that this incredible adventure and this scientific stuff that's supposedly possible. I don't think you're falling into a black hole and coming out, dude, but whatever. I think what ends up being surprising in the end there is that, again, it is these kind of personal one-on-one relationships that is the transcendent. I think I've said this probably before already, but I think the fact that what we learn is that they're not different, but they're us, later on, that they're a lot closer to us than was suggested at the top of the film.
Yes, and they're trying to look out for us retroactively through time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's time for question 4. What is the name of the place where Cooper wakes up in the epilogue?
Locked in.
Locked in.
Locked in.
All right, Nate, what do you have?
It's like the Endurance Constant spaceship thing. Hospital.
Tom?
Cooper Station.
Nick?
Yeah, the hospital in Cooper. I didn't know it was a station, but it was called Cooper.
Cooper something, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, points to Nick and Tom. Yes, Cooper Station. So I didn't like the third act that much, but this epilogue, I thought it was great, right? Like, we finished the story, and now we're literally giving hope for humanity through Cooper Station and all the progress that had been made while he was gone. And then he once again breaks free and gets to go explore the universe. What do you guys think of the final note of this movie?
I'm not fond of the epilogue.
Wow.
Part of it is I think the character of Murph is makes very little sense, and I think the epilogue added to my confusion about what her kind of central motivations are and how realistic those central motivations come out. Apparently this grown brilliant woman has been walking around her childhood and adult life sulking that her dad left her, like she's perpetually 12 years old, and then when he finally gets back, she goes, oh well, you really shouldn't see me die, and then he just leaves, and she's surrounded by relatives who are probably his relatives too, if logic holds, who seem to have no interest whatsoever in the fact that they're
It is
great
very weird.
great grandfather.
They just walk
Yeah,
away.
He's like a legend of this this world.
and they just nobody looks at him twice.
And he doesn't want to meet them either.
Yeah.
Wait, where's my daughter? Okay, she's there.
Yeah. So I again, this whole thing about this kind of connection of about love is part of the physical world and shapes the physical world through the use of will seems to just kind of fall out the bottom when she's just like, I knew my dad would come back. Okay, you really shouldn't see me die. Bye. and that's it.
The whole family dynamic, though, throughout the movie, especially the daughter, really kind of frustrated me. Yes, I understand you're upset your dad's leaving for some higher purpose that you don't quite get at that time, but she continued to like into her adulthood to still not communicate with her dad. It wasn't like a few weeks. It was like a long time that she still held this grudge. And then later, as Tom says, it's like, oh, now I get it. Yeah, go do your thing, you know?
Well, in typical Nolan fashion, he was also trying to tie it back to what Dr. Mann was saying on his planet. That evolution makes it so the last thing we see are kids, or like he was trying to tie it back to that. It had no heart. Like a lot of Nolan stuff, everybody kind of felt robotic when they were discussing that aspect of this.
I'd say the robots had more heart than the people. You know?
Well, it depends on their heart setting, I guess.
It's true. 90%.
Is that heart setting 90%?
Yeah, I mean, there's just as far as like what Cooper's doing, it's yeah, like he always wanted to leave, and he gets permission at the end to do it, you know, and it's an extraordinary situation. You know, I think it's pretty fascinating because it's fictionalization of the thought experiment about the two twins, and one goes, you know, at the speed of light, and so it is interesting thematically to see a father younger than his daughter. Though, you know, it's you know, an impossible thing to believe, and yeah, Nolan's movies don't have a lot of gushing emotion between people, or a lot of warmth, but
it's interesting what you said. He had permission, because he did not have permission to take that ship. He definitely broke like he stole it to get out, but he did have permission from Murph. So I think maybe that's why it was important, right?
yeah, that's how I mean. And also because he left her in the first place, and you know, it's a little interesting because, you know, if he would have listened at the beginning, stay, you know, it was like, you don't need to do this. So I haven't figured that quite out, because the movie seems to be having it both ways. If he had to have gone in order to go forward in the future from that early moment, and
well, I think he was confused at that point, right? So he thought, oh, why don't I just tell myself to stay and that'll solve this? But it wouldn't have. But he didn't know.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah,
but it already happened, and it always will happen.
The ink is dry.
But then what we don't know as an audience is that he can write forward into the future and have an ongoing dialogue with her as an adult, you know, throughout time, and, you know, right up until they can meet together at the other end of a portal or whatever. So that's the way time travel, like the mechanics are still there, and we've just seen the first part of it, but we don't get privy to her 30s and 40s and 50s, presumably taking notes down as he's in this Tesseract.
So congratulations, Nick, for taking down this episode. 4 points for Nick, 3 for Tom, 2 for Nate. Well done.
Yay.
Thank you.
It's time for Movie Rent.
So the one thing I wanted to say about this film, there's elements that I enjoy. I don't necessarily enjoy the whole film, but one of the things that I enjoyed the most that he played with was time. That was one of the things that intrigued me the most, whether it was that water planet with the 7 years, or just how time played into space travel. Not necessarily the fourth dimension, fifth dimension, whatever that is, but the actual flow of trying to turn real life physics into sci-fi applications. So I don't know if I was alone on that, but I really did enjoy that element of this film.
So before we get into that, which could be interesting, yeah, you know, one thing I really liked about this movie is we didn't have a training montage before he became an astronaut and got up into space. That was great. They just had the countdown. What didn't make a lot of sense is how many times the astronauts had to sit around and explain to each other how physics worked. And how did they not realize before they got down to the planet that the person had only been there for an hour or two? Why was that surprising to them only after they got back? So yes, I do enjoy the way he played with time, because I one of the scenes it's really corny, but I love it, is when he comes back and he watches those videos and you're going through his kid's life.
It's emotional, actually.
Oh, it gets me every time. But how did they not know that? I forget what her name was, the scientist that went down. I don't went down there. Not Bran.
Amelia.
It was, well, Bran is Anne Hathaway.
Oh,
Edwards?
No.
Whoever went down to the
the other guy, the guy with the beard.
Nope. So
you're talking about the female who drowned?
Yes.
Oh, the first time. Okay,
Right.
got it.
How did they not realize she had only been there for a few hours? Like nobody is going up into space and getting it that far without doing that calculation before they.
They said they should
Yeah.
have known, but they also said these people only had experienced simulations and didn't have a lot of real world experience. I do get what you're saying there. I thought you were going down the road of how much time elapsed, because the way Nolan cuts this film, there's more time going on than we're seeing. So that's why their 1 hour for 7 years turned into, actually, I can tell you, it turned into 23 years, 4 months, and 8 days.
Yeah, I think there's a problem there, and there's also a shorthand. The shorthand is that we need to explain this to the audience, so people have to sit around and explain it to each other in circumstances in which people normally wouldn't explain something. This is kind of an old trope. This,
For the
it's
audience.
yeah, it's a cheap writing trick. I think the which isn't not a problem. It's still a problem, but whatever. I can kind of get over it. I think the more substantial problem is that the movie is advertising itself as being devoted to accurate science, that what you're seeing is something that really could happen, even though it's not entirely true. And it wants to, and it seems to aggressively put that forward. It seems to put forward the fact that this was signed off by Kip Thorne, actually was conceived of by Kip Thorne. And we have this, Nobel Prize winning physicist who's come in and provided us the real science fiction. And one of the problems with that is those theories are fascinating. The theories of general relativity, the brain theory that he's using to explain the fourth and fifth dimension. They're very interesting. They're far more interesting just reading about them on their own than kind of inserted into the movie to help us, to advertise to us how much research they did or how esteemed their producer is. And I think a lot of times it ends up distracting from the push and energy of the movie, which really is about, finding home again and exploration, and how exploration and finding home are not different things. They don't need to be different things. But making sure that, the science is really possible is, like, after a while you end up getting a ton of scenes where people sit around and go, gargantua, that's what we call it. It is the size of blah blah blah, that
But
type
that's
of
why
thing.
I thought this leaned more to the old school sci-fis, because they had more of that versus explaining an action adventure. We did have action adventure put into the later parts of this, in the different acts KJ was talking about, in the middle, I should say. But because they lean so heavily on science, that's why I felt it was a callback to things like 2001: Space Odyssey. By the way, when you mentioned before that was an inspiration, I didn't do any of that research before, but it made me think of that. So that does not shock me one bit.
Well, can we? I'm Nate. You had mentioned this about looking at this film in the context of other science fiction, and Nick, you've brought it up a number of times. Can we do that right now? I mean, what?
That's
Yeah,
what the
jump
rant's
in.
all about.
Yeah, because for me, like, the sciency-ness of it is very different from 2001. I think the stillness and the quietness of it, as well as the use
That's
of
true.
music, is reminiscent,
Yes.
as well as the type of effect he's using. He's using more practical effects than computer-generated ones.
And it's
But I did.
gorgeous when that ship is going out against the space landscape, similar
Mhm.
to 2001, where it's just visually, it's stunning.
Yeah. It has a kind of, they both are, I think 2001's more interested in kind of the ballet of ships than this, but they're both there. But I didn't find 2001 to be particularly techno-babbly, right? Or science fiction babbly.
Or babbly.
There's one common thread, and they have divergent paths in 2001 and this. But the thing they have in common is a advanced, intelligent monolith left for us.
Mhm.
That's now 2001 doesn't say that they're us. Interstellar says that they're us. That's their postulate. Before we knew that they were us, it could have been imagined that it was another alien race. That's another yet science fiction. That's not an Interstellar, but that just, if you plug that in, that would be another theory for what's going on.
They call it they, early in the movie.
Yeah, and and one might wonder, oh, who are they? And you're supposed to, and then it's, oh, that they're us. Well, that's the answer that the movie gives. Now, for science fiction, we don't know, so there's other answers possible too, and I think that those are interesting as just a starting point, maybe.
Yeah. So what you're saying is like science fiction, um, the kind of the breadth of the worlds in which science fiction typically takes place, even though it's sciency because it's science fiction, that it's always positing a they, or are often positing a
It can
they.
be. I mean, if you look at Battlestar
Mm.
Galactica, there is a they, and they seem to be what we would understand as gods.
Mhm.
Now, I don't quite, like that ending so much, but it metaphysically makes everything work. There is a conscious creator with a character and a personality, though. That's an
Mhm.
interesting posit. Other science fiction doesn't posit that. It could be, are the things in the sky us from the future? Is it another thing? Is it, some other thing even beyond? And it's trying to grapple with what that is.
This also makes me think of a prior film we went over on an episode called Solaris, in which it was almost
Yeah.
a planet
Yeah.
entity or such
Yes.
that had that
Yes.
same drive. Yeah.
Yes. So that postulation is for aliens, some other life that's not, maybe it's connected with us in a larger cosmic biosphere, but it is unknown to us because it's just larger, and it's as weird to us as like us are to like dolphins or things at the bottom of the sea. If we go down there, it's not ever supposed to see us really. It would be alien, and that's what Solaris kind of offers, is that they find other life.
Yeah, and Solaris ends up being inscrutable. It can't be explained, right? It does things, it acts in such a way that we never, like you're saying, if
Well,
dolphins saw us, they wouldn't.
Well, so one thing that there's a thread here actually that just emerged. So it's interesting that you say that, and this isn't quite a challenge, but just getting to the meat of it. What's Solaris seem the planet Solaris communicates psychically and through dreams and altering reality. Now, it's not clear what it's trying to say, but it is trying to communicate and say something. This is very similar to the Orson Scott Card monsters that were being fought whenever they were also trying to communicate peace in dreams. In this movie, we have it. There's communication across time, communication across like dreams, like the psychic ability of things is interesting just in this realm of science fiction.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with Solaris because we're not really sure, and this may be actually coming from the book, which I read, is that then the movie, but I'm kind of mixing them up now, is that with Solaris, we end up not knowing if they're even trying to communicate. That one of the characters ends up saying, it's like, I this thing, whatever it is, or if it's a they, whatever they are, it may not even realize we're here. It may just be
Oh,
responding
that's
to its
interesting.
environment. Yeah. And so I think for me, looking at Solaris and then looking at this film, is they're incredibly divergent in the sense that Solaris posits absolute mystery, right? That there is something that we are not meant to understand. We're not designed to understand it, right? And we never will. We never will. And like you're saying with the dolphin, right? With you swim to the ocean, the bottom of the ocean, you see the dolphin. I don't know if dolphins are in the bottom of the ocean. I don't know very
Yeah,
much
yeah,
about it.
yeah.
But whatever. But the dolphin will never understand the thing it is seeing. It will never understand the scuba diver, right? And we're kind of that way with Solaris. I think what is nice about this movie, to kind of develop a through line between Solaris to this film, is that in Solaris, the unknown is horrifying. It ends up, the consequence of the unknown is that it ruins these people. It just physically and psychologically harms them. With this movie, the unknown is the way out. It's the way to salvation, right? And in the end, what you were talking about with Murph giving Cooper permission to explore, go out and find her, rescue her, like he's now free because he's able to explore without without the kind of emotional weight of abandoning his children, right? That the unknown, the always horizon that science fiction offers us has become a means by which Cooper can be free. For our friends on the space station overlooking Solaris, the unknown is a reminder of their smallness, of their inability to know.
Yeah, and that brings us back to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where Richard Dreyfuss leaves his family behind to go into the unknown. Although I don't know that he had permission exactly, but
And
Definitely
neither
didn't.
did Cooper,
well, no, I think he
in the
well,
beginning. In the
yeah.
beginning, when he left his family. Dreyfuss didn't even care. He's like, I'm going. I'd like to once again congratulate our winner in the most humble way possible, because it's me, Nick. Check out our website, talkingpicturestrivia.com, for more information about us and our episodes. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as our YouTube channel. We are extremely grateful for any positive reviews, as those help others like you find us. If you like what you hear, remember to like and subscribe to our show. What is your favorite Nolan movie and why? Let's continue the conversation on Twitter at Talking Studios. Have additional thoughts? Email us at talkingpicturestrivia@gmail.com or give us a call at 201-467-8679 for a chance to be featured on one of our future From the Listeners episodes. Thanks again, Nate, for joining us today. Where can people find you?
Thank you. Oh, if you're around Charlotte, walking around a park, just kidding. Fic is a podcast. You can listen to it. PHIFIC. We talk about books. And thank you guys for having me. This has been fun.
Oh, no, it was great having you on, Nate.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Nate.
You can find me on Twitter at Thomas Lehman 15.
And you can find me on Twitter at KJ10001000.
I can also be found on Twitter at The Nicknamed. Join us next time as we continue our Guilty Pleasure series and we discuss Tom's guilty pleasure from 1983, Videodrome. First watch for me, I've already been warned. Stay tuned for our first impressions of Videodrome. Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, so Tom recommended Videodrome, and I had not seen it. I'd heard of Cronenberg, but I'd not seen a Cronenberg. So I decided to put it on, and I got to about the scene with the ear. And I stopped it. I took a break. I needed a break. And then I watched this movie in like 10 or 20 minute segments over like a month, because it's tough to stomach. There's a lot going on in this movie. And then I watched it again kind of all the way through. But yeah, what'd you guys think?
Huh? I originally saw this in a philosophy class in graduate school. It was a lit class, but philosophy and film. And the class was a summer class on Thursday night or something like that. And what it would be is the class would go for 2.5 hours till like 8:30 or something. And then after that, he wanted us to stay in the room and watch the movie together as a group. And that would be followed. So I'd finish up by 11:30, and that would be followed by a 2.5 hour subway ride home from the Bronx. So
Wow.
yeah, so I saw this movie and then work at 9 the next day. And he also wanted us to do homework right after. He liked that kind of frantic state. He wanted the students to be kind of frantic all the time. And so the kind of the effort to do the work as well as to transport myself sort of felt like a hallucination, much like I started to I started to see things much in the same way the character did, because I'm just like in this like really bad area in the Bronx at like midnight trying to get home so I could write a paper about like the Freudian effect in the film. So it was and I also couldn't watch the ear scene either. This time or the last time or any time, even though I've seen this movie a number of times.
So this isn't the movie I thought I was going to see, because I know Cronenberg does a lot with body horror. This is the first time I've seen a Cronenberg, and I was excited to see it. But I saw it after Tom and KJ had already started to watch it. And now I know why I kind of had a false interpretation of what I was about to witness, because I have a feeling that they had both gotten through the ear part that KJ is referring to and Tom's referring to. And I thought the whole movie was just going to be something to gross me out. So I will say in some regards, I'm pleasantly surprised. It isn't as horrid as I thought it was going to be. It is out there, but I thought I was getting to something completely different. What I will say too is I saw this movie in 3 parts. The first part, and roughly 30 minutes each, I was confused on what the heck I was watching, because that's where a lot of this gross stuff or S&M type stuff or just really out there type stuff was. The second watching of the middle, I actually started to really enjoy this movie because I saw they were going somewhere a little deeper, or I thought they were. I wanted to know more about these mysteries or what really was going on. And then the third part was just kind of crazy, and I didn't really get all the resolutions that I was hoping to get, but it happened. So I'm happy I saw my first Cronenberg. I thought it was going to be a lot more gross because they kind of set the stage for that before I watched it, but it is an interesting watch.
So yeah, this is the first time I've seen this movie, but I have seen, I believe, 5 other Cronenbergs. The Fly was the only one that I remember with like noticeable horror. So I also saw The Dead Zone, Existence, History of Violence, Eastern Promises. I mean, the History of Violence and Eastern Promises were very violent, but I don't remember, there wasn't any like grotesque body horror that I remember. So yeah, I was kind of expecting, you know, what I saw in The Fly, and it'd been a while since I saw it, but it's gross, but the stuff that's extreme is, it's almost kind of funny to me. It's like watching, I think it was The Evil Dead, where it's so unrealistic looking that it doesn't even bother me that much. But the ear, and I assume you mean the piercing of the ear, which,
yes, the piercing of the
yeah,
ear. Yes,
which is
That's
really
what we meant.
yeah.
yes.
which is really it's funny because it's like, I found it hard to watch, but I imagine her ears were already pierced, and it's probably not, you know, you could use an actual needle and, you know, put some fake blood, and it's like, it looks real, and it could, you know, actually be real going through her ear if it's pierced already. But so I just find it funny that it's that one thing that's it shouldn't really be that horrible to watch, but that was the one thing that you know, made me cringe the most. And I think, you know, same with you guys. It's probably like the most practical effect of all the effects that were done in the movie, I would imagine.
I also had some halibut. I ate some halibut this time.
During the ear scene, Tom?
I closed my eyes and swallowed some halibut. Let's not leave that in. That came out not like I